Okay, so when you can't make your own Academy Awards or Oscars, we make our own. So this is gonna be a low-key thing. I wrote this a few weeks ago, and I'm gonna go through it. I changed some of the questions because they didn't apply. But the first one is Best Actor, and because I didn't have any like favorite protagonists that are male, I decided to choose a male-led book. And I do love the protagonist, but I like the books and the characters around it so much. So this is Dear Edward by Anne Naptolano. This is about a plane crash and about a 12-year-old boy, and he's the only survivor of the plane crash. And his brother and his parents were also on this, and so were many other people, and it intersects someone. And Napolano makes it possible for me to actually care about these characters that I know are going to be dead in like 2 or 3 hours. It follows him from 12 and 18 and has one of the best representation of trauma and PTSD and all of that stuff. It is so gloriously well done and executed in a way that makes you feel so strongly for the characters and what they're going through, and it is like super introspection, and it is all of the things I love. Best Actress is Protagonist, and for this is Felicity Sterling from Blue Castle. I almost brought it because I'm at a cottage right now. That's different scenery, and it's like her one Ontario book, which takes place right near here, and it's one of her only adult books, and I adore it. It came to me when I had just lost a friend and I really needed a comfort read. Anne of Green Gables was the first novel that I completed that was a full novel, so we'll always have things. And I, as a lonely child, like she says in Anna Bavumi, that like I was so hungry for like affection as a child, and I just finished Jane Eyre as well, and I kind of feel that the same way. She's like, I would, you know, hurt myself in any way if I could get affection from you or Miss Temple, is a line she says again. And I can relate very deeply to that yearning for relationships and friendships, and then becoming more established in herself. And Felicity does this, but at a much older age. She's 29 and she's having panic attacks, but she's misunderstanding this as a heart condition. It's just she's like, I who have never lived am going to die. And it becomes her to become herself and to understand who she is. And it's beautiful. It takes place in the early 1900s and it's published in 1926, but it has really good feminism, I think. And she says in one moment that like no one thought that Felicity was dumb because she was afraid. And that line speaks to me very much. Like they are talking about dumb as if not speaking, but also that she's not intelligent. And I love that about Jane as well. The idea that we see a character who is not thought of as intelligent or not thought of as competent because of their looks and because of their plainness. And you know, that same line that you think that because I am small and little and unrefined that I am heartless and soulless. That is a paraphrase, but I find that so beautiful. And as I was kind of thinking and reflecting on it in my mind, I also thought about how all three of these characters become characters that become more beautiful to the audience and to themselves as they establish themselves. Like Anne definitely has this. She goes from someone who, well, I don't think everyone ever thought she was ugly. Well, I guess she's called homely by Rachel Lynde, but like, and by the end they call her gorgeous throughout the thing. Same with Felicity. People go from calling her like plain and ugly, but as she embraces her own fashion, as she embraces her own style and her own love, she is considered very beautiful. Same with Jane Eyre. She's almost pretty by the end. And I don't know, I find that very empowering because I also finished She of the Mountains, and this is just going to be a discussion because, you know, this is going to be a chatty video. And we have this conversation where he says, so it's about a boy who is told he is gay in the 90s and he's not really sure what that means, and it's a coming of age intersected with Hindu mythology, and it's so gorgeous. And then he's kind of like, but I'm still attracted to women. So then he's kind of finding out what being queer means, what being bisexual means, and it's gorgeous. But he says one line that struck with me, and he's like, I like my body when I'm with you. And then near the end he says, I want to like my body without you. And it's gorgeous. The idea of like loving yourself and learning to stand on your own independence is something that I think is gorgeous. And it does really think like aesthetic does play into beauty, but I think that believing in yourself and confidence and one does make people more beautiful, and you can tell. Best cinematography, and for this I have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I adore her writing like nothing else. Like the descriptions are ways that cut me into my soul. Again, a character that is like, you know, young and thought of as very like unsure, and I just love the way that she describes feelings and emotions and thoughts in a way that pierces my soul so much. Best costume design, and we have Una out of order. This was again one of my favorite novels of last year, and I wrote a really long review that I still have not filmed, but it intersects a lot of things. So on her 18th birthday, she skips to being 53, and she's like, what the heck is going on here? And pretty much her first 18 years alive were in order, but the rest of them, she, as we follow her, in her mind, not biologically, so chronologically, not biologically, or whatever. And it's such a coming of age of discovering that not everyone is going to be in your life forever. And this is a beautiful cover which intersects her face with different like hairstyles and different ages and wrinkles and stuff like that. And it depicts it so well, like the idea that she's beginning to understand that wherever she is in life, she will either miss someone, either because they are dead or gone or not there, or they haven't been born yet. And that's something that I feel very intrinsically, and like the fact that even if she lived chronologically, would know that. And it is so precious to me, and I love that story. And I think that it's such an interesting coming of age slash like getting to know one, because she's like in her 20s throughout. Gorgeous. And then we have Best Supporting Actress. So I said ensemble cast because I love ensemble cast so much. So The Vanishing Half is a group of characters that are so flawed, and yet I love so much. I love when we zoom in and out of different people's characters. And I don't know, I don't think I have time in the video to go into all of the characters, but it is about two sisters who are both able to white pass. And one of them decides to, and one decides to marry a very dark-skinned man, and they live very different lives. And their daughters, who one is considered white and one is very dark, and how their life as cousins and not knowing, and like people being separated by family and not knowing each other, and like disconnect from family and lore and culture and all of these things. And it takes place in the 50s to 90s. Oh, it is gorgeous. Best Supporting Actor. So I have like side, and I just have Anna Karenina. Oh, male. I don't know what I was trying to say here, but I do love Anna Karenina. I was like, I just want to talk about my favorite books. I think that's stuff. Anna Karenina had such interesting characters and such interesting descriptions, and I really loved them. It was funny, hilarious. I felt that they were well-rounded, despite the fact that, you know, this is like a 200-page book, or 200, it's a 900-page book from 200 years ago. And I don't know, I really loved sitting with the characters and getting to know them throughout. It made me so incredibly happy. Okay, what else do we have? Best Original Screenplay, Unique World Plot. And I didn't write anything. Well, maybe I'll put something later. Okay, Best Adapted Screenplay, Bly Manor. Oh, and Umbrella Academy as an honoring mention, because I said that last year, and I still love it, and I loved it in the 60s. Bly Manor is so good. I read Turn the Screw this year, and then I read it again, because I read it again with my roommate after, or before, when Bly Manor was coming out. And I actually haven't finished it, because we intersect back and forth into TV shows a lot. But it is so well done so far in like the first like 5 episodes. I love the rendering. It Turn the Screw was really interesting, and it was more interesting for the psychological questions and the obvious mystery and debate in it, and I love those ambiguous endings. But I thought that the rendering of it into modern day and into the story, like Haunting of Hill House is one of my favorite books. I don't know, it's near the top, and I didn't like the adaptation very much. But this one, who kept the characters the same, I thought did a really, really solid job, and I absolutely animated feature. So graphic novel. I adore Harleen. It is a story that I think will be precious to my heart for a very long time. It is a Black Label retelling of Harley Quinn, and I haven't really, this was my first really encounter with Harley Quinn, and I am so glad that I read it. As someone who also, you know, is in psychology and in that, I took a lot of like love from it, but I thought the artwork was just beautiful, and it melded so well with the story, because he was artist and author as well, and I adore the story so much. I adore the shadows, the way that it works, the story that we're told, the introspection, everything about the story I adore. So even if you don't like comics, or even if you don't like a lot of other things, like I feel like this is a good entryway. And if you don't like Harley Quinn, like I didn't think I liked Harley Quinn either. Okay, Best Director, First Time Author. We have Jacqueline Woodson. So this is my first time author. I read 3 of her books last year. I think I read 1 this year. Anyways, so I read, because I hadn't read Red of the Bone, I think, last year. But we have Brown Girl Dreaming, which, wow, was incredible. And then I read Before the Ever After, which I broke down in my like favorite new authors. And it is a book that speaks to chronic illness in a way that I just absolutely adore in every possible way. And then I also read Another Brooklyn, which deals with coming of age in the 1970s. Her writing is lyrical, it is introspection, it is really, really personal. And lovely. I have chronic pain and my leg is currently completely numb, so I'm like looking at it being like, I can't feel my leg. Okay, yeah, I am a little distracted, but I do really, really love the way that she writes and the way that she tells stories. I think that it's really, really amazing. And in the beginning of and throughout Brown Girl Dreaming, which is her memoir, but it's kind of written in verse, and it could it could be a novel. It's very like unsure if it was a novel at first because it was marketed as a novel, but it definitely has it's her biography. And we look at her and we look at the different characters and like, you know, like when she was born, where was Martin Luther King, where was Malcolm X, where was all of these different people, and it introspects history with her, which I love it. So my meta answer to best visual effects action is Albatross by Terry Fallis. I love this. Another Canadian novel. Adore, adore, adore. And this is about a guy who doesn't like golf, and but he is really, really good at golf. But mostly it's coming of age story and him like deciding what he wants in life and kind of pursuing it versus what other people want to tell him. And he plays a lot of golf, and he's not very good at golf though when he thinks about it, but he's really, really good when he's not thinking about it. So he's to not think about it. And through that, he has a lot of philosophical questions and literature questions and stuff like that with his coach, who becomes like a parental parent to him. And it is just absolutely wonderful and amazing. Then we have Best Musical Score. So Mechanisms is a band that I discovered last year, and they are amazing. Thank you, best friend, for this. They are like space opera concept albums. I can't really describe them well, but they tell really good story. My favorite is Ulysses Dies at Dawn. It is a rendering of the Odyssey as well as many other Greek horrors, and it's just one of those fabulous, fabulous stories, and it's told through like very wonderful storytelling in many musical elements and sarcasm and great, and I love the lead singer in there, who is also the runner of the podcast Magnus Archives. Loves. Anyways, then we have some Medusa by Heather Dale is an adaptation of Medusa, also from Greek mythology, that I absolutely love. Also Changeling Child by her. And then we have some actual stuff in movies or films, which is supposed to be, and that would be Hello and Bad Guy. Their covers in Umbrella Academy are just through the roof amazing. And then we have Best Picture, Standalone. Most of my books were standalone this one. And, yes. And no, we have Best Short Film, which is Novella at first, and that would be The Lottery and Other Stories. And this isn't a novella, but it is a group of short stories, and I want to read more after this. Shirley Jackson is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. I think that she does a fabulous job of rendering stories in a way that are creepy and terrifying in ordinary life. And I can't really say much more, but I think that she goes into the psychology and the unnervingness of reality so well. And the more you get an adult, the more you figure out that life is unnerving. Then we have Best Picture or Standalone. And most of my books are standalones, but this one, My Dark Vanessa, is a book that from the moment I heard about it, I knew I was going to love, and I did indeed. It looks at an abusive relationship of a 15-year-old who is conditioned by her teacher and then begins a sexual relationship with him. He begins a sexual relationship with her, and her abuse, and her like 20 years later or 15 years later, and she's still unable to deal with relationships and stuff like that, but she's also believing that this relationship was romantic. But in the Me Too movement and people coming out and addressing him assaulting people, and she's like, no. So it's her rendering of it, and it is very hard to read, but it is so well done. And a great exploration of trauma and PTSD and conditioning and grooming. That is the word I was thinking. I was like, not the psychological term. Yeah, it's so well done. And how like rape can be rape without things like trigger warnings for things in like the next 30 seconds. So there's a moment when he's like, when their first encounter, and they do some foreplay and stuff like that, and then he's like, you know, I'm not gonna have like sex with you tonight. And she's like, okay. And then like she's like wakes up in the night, and like he's in her, and she's like, I thought he said he wasn't gonna do that yet, and like things like that, like where he's like, oh yeah, you're in control, and then he will succeed to not let her be in control. And yeah, so that like represents it in a very way that someone will say with their words something and then do something else with their actions. So next we have Best Documentary, and I divided this into historical fiction and nonfiction because it originally says either or, but I read lots of both, so I wanted to highlight two. We have Seven Fallen Feathers, and this is by Tanya Talek. And this deals with racism and the missing and murdering of Indigenous children in Thunder Bay, which is a northern part and like most northern part of Ontario, which is the province I live in, even though it's like 18 hours away because Canada is freaking massive. But so because there isn't a lot of adequate high schools on reserves, and a lot of things are not great on reserves, many people and children have to go to Thunder Bay to get school, and they are being I was gonna say leased, my goodness, bigoted or billeted at other people's houses. So they don't, it's a loss from community, it's a loss from family. Like being 14 years old and like boarding school we know isn't great. So in the 60s, when the residential schools, which were the anglicizing of Native children, and just abusive and horrendous in so many ways, culturally and like sexually and physically and mentally, all of the ways that you can abuse people was done at these schools, and wasn't closed until 1996, which was the year before I was born, and that is insane. Anyways, it deals with a lot of people who were missing and lost during that time in the 60s while it was still open, and then also deals with the 2000s when technically it wasn't residential schools, but operated in many of the same ways, because you're taking people out of the culture and you're taking people out of the things, and it's dealing with these and kind of the Canadian government not actually stepping up or acknowledging that this was happening, and the fact that like the police didn't choose to loan because they were like, oh, these are just drunk people, we don't need to, despite the fact that they were like 15 or 14. And it is so well done. If you're Canadian, even if you're not Canadian, I think as it is a must read. It is really eye-opening into the way that we treat people and the way that culture looks at Indigenous youth. And like Canada is, I think, sanctioned by the UN currently because of our missing and murdered, especially Indigenous women. So really relevant to now, and so well. Like I feel like I could reread it multiple times and really like know more about the situations in this world. Anyways, and then we have historical fiction. I was like, what could I couldn't read it for a second. So this is a classic, If Beale Street Could Talk. And this is by James Baldwin. This is my first James Baldwin, and from the opening pages, it broke me open. So it is about this, I think they're late teenagers, like 1920, and he is in jail and she is pregnant. And it's about the wrongful arrest and of a black man, and how that affects his family and how that affects one. And as a coming of age, it follows them from their children into this and now, and it is heartbreaking and amazing and incredible. It's James Baldwin. Like, I want to read all his work, and I really recommend it as a book. And that leads me things. I did not have my notes on here, but I hope that you enjoyed my discussion of some of my favorite books of last year and why I liked them, even if they didn't fit completely in those categories. And happy reading and writing. Tell me which your favorite books of last year were in any of these sections, and have a great day.